it's a grind. And Dave said this recently, which I thought was quite good, which was, if a movie wins an Academy Award, it's like, okay, great, you're going to watch the movie. With Michelin stars, with reviews, every single night, you're essentially trying to re-achieve that accomplishment that got you that award.
This is Taste. I'm your host, Matt Rodbard. Marguerite Zabar Mariscal started as an intern at Momofuku in 2011, working her way through the influential restaurant group founded by David Chang, all the way up to the position of CEO, which she's held since 2019. On this entertaining episode, we speak about Marguerite's journey from growing up a Zabar, that is New York City grocery royalty, to running Momofuku's sprawling restaurant and consumer packaged goods business, all while working side by side with the famously difficult and impossibly genius David Chang. It's so good catching up with one of the brightest stars in the food world, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. Marguerite Zabar Mariscal, welcome to This is Taste. How are you?
Great. Happy to be here.
I'm excited to chat with you. I was just out to dinner with our mutual friend Priya Krishna, and we were just reflecting about you working at Momofuku and Lucky Peach and all the adjacent businesses, but also how, you're really the fabric of that company. You started as an intern, and you grew from, you worked in the press department, you worked in design, you ran design, and you rose to the role of CEO in 2019 at the age of 26. Whose idea was it to be CEO?
Definitely not mine. And Melissa Clark actually once asked me if I always wanted to be a CEO, which I think is such an insane thing to want or to have be a career aspiration. No, I very much, I think, just worked my way up in the company. And I call people at work sometimes goldfish, people that kind of grow to the size of their tank. And so I just kind of kept amassing responsibilities like year over year. And so at a certain point, I think the last job I had before CEO was creative director, something like that. And then from there, there were conversations for a while about me becoming CEO, and I kept saying no. And then eventually it just kind of, I don't know, I was persuaded. I don't know what the right
There was like
answer
an
is.
email about your welcoming to the company as CEO, and then that you became CEO.
No. It was very much, I think I always just assumed, having, I was an English major, and a lot of my work experience is either in my family's businesses or at Momo. And so I think I just assumed that I didn't have the skill sets of what you needed. And I think maybe just after 12 years of working there, the way I thought about it was, if I didn't do it, someone else would. And I think I was at a point where I really wanted to have the responsibility of figuring out what the next step of the business was. Yeah. And so it was kind of eventually made sense. But yeah, no, it was a journey to get there for sure.
And, backing up a bit, we're going to center this conversation around Marguerite, around you, but obviously the long shadow, the short shadow is David Chang, who started the company and who is still very involved with the company. But also he is very much involved with Major Domo Media, which is his company that has him cooking on Netflix Live and doing podcasts with Chris Yang, which we love. So I think we have to talk about DC a bit in this conversation, but I want to really center it around you. When you just take over as CEO, it's at a pretty pivotal time in 2019. We're like months away from this global pandemic.
Very much so, yeah.
I mean, really challenging. I mean, things were definitely going, I wouldn't say south, but, 2019 wasn't like the best time for restaurants. Obviously, labor is a huge issue, and we can get into that. But when you take over, are you thinking that you have to pare down the restaurant group because you're at around 15 more, and then you've had to scale back quite a bit? Or was that something that the pandemic caused? Because I think Momofuku is a restaurant group to me still. I know CPG is huge. You do so much more, but obviously Sam is such a beloved restaurant to me personally, and many of our listeners and many others. What were you thinking when you took over?
Yes, I mean, Sam, extremely important restaurant to me as well. I don't know. There was never any idea that we had to scale back restaurants. I think what we did know is that we had to diversify. So I think pre-pandemic, we were working on these consumer packaged good products. It really, for us, Momofuku is notoriously not great at scaling concepts. I think, we had 15 restaurants and probably 14 concepts. So when we thought about a way of growth, a way of scaling, products really made sense for us. We could kind of capture the flavors. And there was a really cool stat we had, which was, I think 90% of the people that follow Dave and Momofuku don't live in cities in which we operate restaurants. Yeah. So there was this whole community out there that was, fans of the brand. Yeah. I mean, 20 years of at this point of building this brand. And so we thought products were really a way of reaching people. And I think there was also probably a pivot with both my and Dave's thinking around also what kind of projects we wanted to do. I mean, things like which started as a 12-seat restaurant, I think became increasingly less interesting to Dave. He had done it great. It did a lot, I think, for changing New York City dining. But
and there's a level of grinding it out with that kind of concept.
Entirely.
Sean Gray ran it, and very, 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 very accomplished restaurant, but still, it's a grind.
It's a grind. And Dave said this recently, which I thought was quite good, which was, if a movie wins an Academy Award, it's like, okay, great, you're going to watch the movie. With Michelin stars, with reviews, every single night, you're essentially trying to re-achieve that accomplishment that got you that award. And so it's a total grind, and it's really, there's huge wins, and it's fun sometimes, and sometimes it sucks. And so I think we were trying to find a path forward where also not only is it a grind, but also how do you feed more people, and how do you change the perception of food, which I think Momofuku was able to do in 2004 with Dave opening Noodle Bar. But what's the next frontier of that? And I think grocery stores are so behind restaurants in terms of, the fact that I think people are more food educated than ever, and the perception of understanding not just Chinese food, but Cantonese versus Szechuan, that's becoming more and more knowledgeable.
Which is Dave's brand. When you talk about his media and the way he talks vividly and at length about regional Asian cuisine, I feel like that is truly his passion.
Totally. And I think that is kind of, and I think there's just a general kind of lift. I think younger generations are just infinitely more food knowledgeable, but you're not really seeing that reflected back in supermarkets. And especially, it's funny, like Dave never cooked at home. He was traveling all the time. Anyone, who's a chef knows that that's not when you come home, then the first thing that you're necessarily going to do. And I was traveling, I think, probably every other week to the different restaurants. And so
you had 15 at one point.
Yeah. And Sydney, Australia, Toronto,
Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, New York,
Vegas. And so, the pandemic was also for us kind of the first time that we were at home cooking. And I think just seeing what was available, at a Whole Foods or what was available at Gelson's, whatever it is, it just wasn't up to the standards, I think. And, I was making trips to Sunset Park during the pandemic to kind of restock and be able to cook the things that I wanted to cook. So I think for us, trying to use food as a way of, educating more people around these products is something that I think was exciting and new. Whereas I think, for restaurants, we had opened so many. And I think for us, it was really about recalibrating and making sure that the business wasn't, completely pot invested in one area.
Oh my gosh. I mean, from a P&L perspective, you look at a restaurant P&L and a CPG P&L, and they're very different, drastic, especially looking at the margin, looking at bottom line. When you talk about the affinity for the brand, you're talking that's a striking fact that you just mentioned. 90% outside of cities like Los Angeles, New York, Washington, D.C., Vegas, and Toronto. It's that's a lot of audience. And my question is when you're thinking about CPG and launching products, and Dave early in the pandemic did a lot of media around this, and he was very savvy in talking about the need for restaurants to pivot into new territories. And I think he won Kara Swisher's podcast or maybe some podcasts. But let me ask you, what's the first 3 SKUs that you're we need to do these products because these are the ones that are going to crush right away?
Well, I wouldn't say we were necessarily right about what would crush. And
let's go. Totally.
I think it was definitely a learning curve for us. We really started with this idea. I mean, Momofuku had a culinary lab since 2010, and it made these products called Hozan and Bongji. And so Bongji was essentially soy sauce, but replacing soy with New York State rye or tomato as the base. And similarly on Hozan, it was like a miso, but with chickpea as opposed to soybeans. And those we sold to, 11 Madison Park, to Bennu, to, a bunch of us. We use them, in our own kitchens. And but we had never really I think we at one point in 2019, we're like, well, have we ever made soy sauce? Have we ever made miso? If you want people to understand these products and to adapt them, you really have to almost meet people where they are, right? And so people can understand soy sauce, but we can, and exactly as you said, through media, education, we have 600,000 people on an email list that started with the restaurants, then during the pandemic grew to be that plus everything else. We can tell a story of well, how do you make soy sauce? And why is this soy sauce different than maybe the caramel colored, version that you maybe have in your fridge? And so the ability to tell those stories. But for us, going back to your question about what was going to crush, I don't know, it's interesting. I think, and this is where I think, 20 years of running a restaurant really helps, where what people like, right? What
kind of right away
have hit. Yeah.
Kind of right away. With this restaurant, you get feedback right within 48 hours of opening.
Totally.
I'm sure CPG, you get the same thing.
So 100%. And so what's interesting is CPG, the lead times are much longer, but we're taking bets on things that we know have worked, right? And flavors that sweet and spicy, gochu, all of that stuff. We know that hits, right? Ginger scallion, we know that hits. And so how can we then craft products around these flavors? And so, we had this point, the first products we had were these seasoned salts, which I still use, all the time. But, seasoned salts, people don't go through them that quickly, as something that you might buy a direct to consumer. It's not as, frequent as instant noodles, right?
Let me just say this.
Yeah.
You sent me those salts during the pandemic, and I got it with the cool, R&D kind of packaging.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, not a great product in terms of burning through packages, but man, the tingly, I still use. I think I have the original still.
It's incredible.
It's just was such a great thing to have during the pandemic. But I'm glad that you're admitting some slight pivots during your business, because you obviously seasoning salts, you're only going to need it once or twice a year.
Yeah.
Ramen, on the other hand, very different.
Very different. And I think for us, just learning about how, CPG works, right? And understanding velocity kind of being a major factor. We then started almost with every product moving towards something that is more day to day, right? So things like Chili Crunch then gave way to things like the instant noodles. We're working on some new products that kind of fit into that same idea. But
we've been using the sauces, my wife and I, tomorrow. I mean, my wife loves the sauces. You sent them to me. They're really good.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much you can talk about them, but I love them.
I don't know either how much I can talk about them.
We will say that there are a couple sauces you can use as stir-in sauces, sauté sauces. You can use them as a condiment. I'm selling these because they're good.
They're really good.
No, this is 100% non-paid. I really can't wait to launch those products.
Yeah, no, we're excited, and and I think really the culinary background of kind of in a commitment, I think, to quality. We're always kind of bridging this line between having it be something that we're immensely proud of and obviously at a price point that people can afford. And I think, let's use the seasoned salts as an example where we're literally taking salt and basically covering it in tamari and then dehydrating it back to salt. And that step, most people, if you have a seasoned salt, it's like salt mixed with
added liquid smoke, added MSG, added, but you're doing this osmosis reverse, or I'm just throwing words around basically, sorry, but you're doing something cool.
No, and it's that's not easy, right? That's hard.
Definitely not.
But you then taste it, right? You don't even know it, but you taste it. And I think for us, it's really about, same with the Chili Crunch, a lot of people will, fry off or roast off the onions, garlic, etc., and then, put it into an oil. And we're roasting everything in the oil, which then makes the oil itself be infinitely more flavorful than a lot of what's out there. And so little things like that, once again, you might not notice, but you'll notice in terms of the taste versus the other guys. You
mentioned the word hard, and it's a transition I want to go into. Working with David Chang, it seems, knowing of Dave, and I've met him a few times. We're not friends or anything. Hard is kind of the path of choice for Dave Chang and many at Momo, and it's not because he's a masochist. It's because, well, maybe he is, but I don't know. I don't know the guy.
I think we all are.
But truly, hard is what creates excellence. And let me ask you, Marguerite, how do you work with a guy who likes to take the hard way and who's a hard guy, and he's full of ideas, opinions, innovation, takes. He's take master extraordinaire. But he's also famously hot-headed. He's spoken openly about this. How do you guys work? I mean, is he texting you all the time? Do you guys have Cal invites? I mean, what this is just a little bit of a curiosity. I think our listeners will appreciate how you work with David Chang.
Yeah. I mean, it's been, luckily like a really great relationship that I have, worked with him in some capacity since 2011. So it's been very, productive and I think great relationship. I think the reason it works is I think are very aware of our own strengths and our own weaknesses. And I think, whether it's understanding that Dave not only has a lot of ideas, but a lot of great ideas. And as you said, even if it's the hard way, like processing it, taking it, and finding a path forward for it, right? And being able to translate, I think, that to the team. But at the same time, Dave, if he was here, would say, if I wasn't there, he would have opened 10 restaurants during the pandemic. And so it's the ability to kind of understand each other and what we're bringing to the table, and then being able to have dialogues around a lot of that stuff. And so it's been pretty seamless, but, that's 12 years in the making.
Yeah,
so
of course. And therapy and open communication. And also, obviously, you're running the show for the restaurant group and for CPG. He's running the show for Major Domo Media. So you've got real fiefdoms there.
Well, but I would say like he is still very involved in, product development, new restaurant concepts, all of that.
Oh, he is? Okay. I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. No. He's tasting every batch of, a CPG product as we're scaling it up. Like he's very, the idea to do Chili Crunch and the idea that a chili crisp could conventionally work in retail, like that's Dave's brain, right? Like I wouldn't be able to have guessed that, or, and if you look at it, the chili crisp market in conventional grocery has grown exponentially. And that growth is like, it's not just us. Obviously, there's a lot of great players in the space, but like he in 2019 saw that before it even existed. And so that is where it's like, knowing when to listen, knowing when to like trust the intuition. And I think my job really in a lot of ways is, focusing him on, so we were talking about doing a product once and someone said to us, it's a good idea, but it might not be a big idea. And I think a lot of what I do is trying to focus Dave's brain on big ideas. Like what are things that are going to have material impacts for the business? What are the things where, he has a superpower that we need to leverage?
I love that. He does have a lot of those.
And then move away a lot of the like, I don't know, bureaucracy or, like having him focus his effort on, what color to make this wall, right? It's like, how do you really hone his brain in on what he does best?
I've known a lot of people who've worked within the group, mostly as in the restaurant side. And, the line about him is pretty consistent, is that, Dave is somebody you need to stand up to, which, isn't the best thing, but I'm not going to get into any of that. I'm just going to say, do you guys get in fights? Do you guys because I feel standing up to Dave is kind of, the narrative is like, you need to be confident and you need to like kind of just say what you got to say. And that's what he responds to the best.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I would still be here if I wasn't, right? I think that it's very much a two-way street and a relationship. And I think that is key. Key to any healthy, long-term relationship is being able to, have disagreements and hear each other out and being able to find a path forward.
Yeah. Marguerite, let's talk about restaurants. I think we need to really focus in on a few areas. We need to talk about Sambar. We need to talk about RIP. We need to talk about what's happening at Noodle Bar at Columbus Circle. Our office is within a short walk of there, and we go a lot with authors. We do a lot of lunches there. I have to say, and I was out with some colleagues maybe a month ago, it's never been better. And I mean this fully. The salad, which is not something you think about.
Favorite salad at Momofuku.
Let's go over that salad. What's the salad? I love that salad.
So that salad was actually something Dave made for a tasting that we were doing in Las Vegas. And then Max was able to take it and make it into something to put onto the menu at Columbus Circle. But it's truly, I mean, I've a whole bit, if anyone who works at Momo knows that I just personally feel like we never have enough salads, or we never have enough like foils to our food. And Jude, the chef at Major Domo, has never I'll never shut up about the salad that we have is like covered in like trout roe and, has like a creamy dressing. And I'm like, Jude, like we just like I want like lettuce. But, he's right in that if you look at the sales, like we've put on simple salads and they just don't sell as well as a trout roe.
It's indulgent. I mean, shout out to Jude. I love that guy. I haven't seen him in years. Man, it has to be indulgent. It has to be extra. Obviously, you're pairing with a lot of alcohol. It's a big part of your business is umami and getting people to drink bottles and bottles and bottles of alcohol. That's just how restaurants work.
But I eat the restaurants the way that you eat at the restaurants, which is I'm there like once a week, and I really want like a refreshing green salad.
So what's on the salad at Columbus Circle? Because like I'm just like, go order that salad, people.
No, it's so good. I truly have asked Max what the dressing is, and he won't tell me. So I can't give you everything. But citrus and rice vinegar, I believe. But it has these like puffed nori chips, which add a lot of crunch. It's just truly like a lovely, refreshing salad. But I'm with you. I think the food at Columbus Circle right now is some of the best that we have. And we actually had a whole company retreat where we had all the GMs, exec chefs come to New York, and everyone, ate around at the restaurants. And even our team out in Vegas are like, even the ginger scallion at Columbus Circle compared to, their ginger scallion, they're like, it's night and day. And they're like, once again, like, how do they do it? How do we replicate that? Like, it is truly like really incredible right now.
Shout out to Max Ang too, previous guest on the show. Got to get him back. The big difference between pre and post pandemic. I did not like it during pre-pandemic, but I think I was tending to think that it was like a little bit going through the motions, and not now. So I hope maybe Wells will give it a peek again. All right, a little bit of a brief detour to 207 2nd Avenue, the home of Momofuku Sam, R.I.P. My favorite restaurant, probably for 9 of 10 years, and the aughts. I feel like that was such an important restaurant. What was the day like when you decided, you and Dave, to like cut it?
It was an extremely, extremely hard conversation. And, and I have a lot of empathy going through the pandemic of, less so for major real estate corporations, but, there are these one-off landlords in the East Village that, have 1 or 2 properties and, they're not getting relief. We're not getting relief. Like I have a lot of empathy, but I think it also made a lot of great restaurants, more precarious than it could have been. But yeah, I think, Sambar, I think, is in a lot of ways like the root of Momofuku, in that it, the famous story of it started as like a Korean burrito bar that was bombing. So Dave, who had leveraged, everything to open it, had to basically figure it out. And so that became, late night dining. And then that became the menu that then got 3 stars. And I worked with Max on the renovation of Sambar to then get 3 stars again, which was like truly like
Max's menu, the best. There's many great chefs there, but Max's menu there was really the top of the mountain for that restaurant.
Yeah, I know. I think so. And so, I think for us it was really sad, but I think at the same time, and I think we took this tact with a lot of restaurants, it's like it should go out on top in a way. And I think Co is a great example of that in its previous iteration. We had the #1 restaurant in Australia, which we decided with the GM and the exec chef to close down. The lease was up after 10 years. And, they're both moving on to other things.
I dined at Sabo.
I think that is...
I got through the maze of the Star Casino. I was there with the British guy. I can't remember his name, who was a chef there at the time. Before Carmichael was there. Yeah, exactly, that guy.
Ben
Grino, shout out to him. That was a really good meal. Man, restaurants are really the North Star of your group. Obviously, you hear this interview and you just know Marguerite's thinking about restaurants probably more than CPG. So I got to ask you, what can you tell me about future restaurants? Because, Dave's always on his podcast. He's like, we're going to do a soup and stew. We're going to do chige. We're going to do gamjatang. We're going to do solentang. We're going to do this like cool soup and stew concept. I mean, he's full of ideas. Is that ever going to happen?
Yeah. I think, there's been a lot of press around us deprioritizing restaurants. And I think people will see over the next year that that's not the case. I think for us, it's really about, I think, just what I would say is, there was some article that said, we say restaurants are important, but we're closing them. And I think the thing is, restaurants just can't look the way they did the pre-pandemic. And so that just means that you have to recalibrate, you have to rejigger. And for us, it's about opening restaurants, but maybe not doing it necessarily the way that we did before.
Give me a few details. You got to give me a few details.
I don't know if I'm allowed to give you any details.
You're the boss. So
over the next, I'm not.
You're the boss.
When it comes to this stuff, I know. My bosses are PR.
All right, we won't talk about cities. We don't. Okay, let's set some ground rules. No cities. no opening dates, so none of that stuff. Let's talk about the vision board and the style, the cuisine. Are we gonna get another a Korean? I mean, Unjo is the
Oh my
dopest
God.
chef,
Yeah.
and I'm sure you've called her weekly for about 5 years to get her back in the kitchen. She seems to be doing a great time doing her own thing. She's in our book Korea World, so shout out to that. Now, I have to ask you though, like that restaurant was special, and it was like your most Korean restaurant, but obviously you can even go even more Korean restaurant.
Yeah. No. I mean, Joe is truly an unbelievable person and talent. Like I was nodding vigorously when you were talking about spending a lot of my time trying to get her to come back and open a restaurant.
Yeah.
For us, I think it's about finding the moments to be spontaneous, finding the moments to be pushing. But I think it's also, I think there's just been a change, at least in my thinking and in Dave's thinking around, also just making people happy. And I think that that's something that, Nishi, that was a restaurant that we redesigned, we reconcepted. And I think it was a huge learning lesson for us. So it was almost like too inside baseball. It was very like, every dish that you just listed, you're going to get an audience, but you're also going to turn a lot of people away. Yeah. And so I think for us, it's not about shying away from those flavors, but how do you, and I think CPG has actually been super helpful in this way where it's like, how do you get people to try, right? And it's like, you can't change how people eat if you can't get them to the door. So I think for a lot of this, it's how do you design a restaurant that's inviting, that, you can get people to try these flavors. And I think Major Domo was kind of a great example of that, where our restaurant in LA, there's a dish, that's inspired by Sun Non Dan when we opened, which is this amazing restaurant in LA. But,
that's Colby Jim, right?
Yeah. But we didn't call it Colby Jim.
Yeah.
We called it, short rib stew.
Of course, yeah.
And, people would eat it, love it. And then, we would say, hey, it's, based on this thing. And so that trial, that ability to get people to experiment, to maybe order something
it
they
makes
typically
sense.
wouldn't.
Marguerite, may I push back just slightly on the idea of, I think the diner, I mean, look at Hand Hospitality Group.
Totally.
And like doing, I would say, really gutty, and maybe they will do guts one day, but like really they're doing food that doesn't compromise. And I think I understand what you're saying fully about packaging. Momofuku, people walk in from Omaha, Nebraska and want something, but I mean, I hope you can figure out a way to put the Korean words on the menu and make it feel, because I feel Dave talks about this ad nauseum on his pod, and to get him to do a gamtang restaurant or a naengmyeon restaurant and calling it naengmyeon, to me, as someone who cares about Korean food from a writing point of view, but also culturally, it would be super dope.
Yeah, I mean,
but disagree, please.
No. I mean, Priya's article about
article.
the group was great, and I think what they're doing is incredible. It's interesting, and that's their game. And I guess what I would say is, Momofuku in a lot of ways, and this is something that I think we've come to be proud of. It's like a bit of like a gateway drug for a lot of people. And I think that's what it was in 2004 when it opened. And, people didn't know that ramen could be, not a packaged, product that came in a styrofoam cup. And so I think that we're maybe, just given Dave's reach, given the brand, I think it's finding this middle ground where, completely to your point, it's not whitewashing any of the flavors or the background of it. I think it's just where we show up, who shows up, and I think we're more interested almost in like bringing people into that fold as like that first step.
Trojan horsing it too.
Trojan horsing it.
I think that's a really great way to put it when you talk about a gateway drug. And, Dave, major credit for bringing, Korean food, even though he was like kicking and screaming along the way. I remember I interviewed him for Koreatown and he was like, don't call me a Korean chef. That was like what he actually said.
So,
but he's evolved, I believe, fully.
I don't know, man. So I think what's interesting is in if you look at the About Us page on Noodle Bar's website from like 2004, it says Momofuku is an American restaurant. And there was a quote from Wolfgang Puck from like a 1989 cookbook, something like that, that says, essentially America is diversity into unity. And like, what's more American than all of these flavors coming together? And I think that's always been, Dave, there's a famous only to me story of, there's a ramen restaurant open like 2 blocks away from Noodle Bar. And it basically had a sign on the door that was like, we're authentic. If you want authentic noodles, come here. Like, don't go to, what's the other place?
Shots fired a little bit.
Shots fired a little bit.
Yeah.
But then Dave just put a note on the door that said, hey, if you want authentic ramen, go to those guys. Like, that's not our business. That's not what we're doing here. We're using Benton's bacon. We're intentionally creating something that is an amalgamation of like Dave's upbringing, his time in Japan, him being Korean American. And so I think this concept of authenticity as it relates to Momofuku or it relates to Dave is just not the same as some other chefs.
I mean, look at the ham program at Sam. I mean, for example, putting 5 or 6 heritage U.S. hams on there, doing a red eye mayo, which is like instant coffee, mayonnaise, and rice vinegar. So good. I still make it. It's from the Momofuku cookbook. It's like, honestly, that is exactly what the heart of Momofuku is. So you really kind of course corrected me in thinking, yeah, great, Hand is doing and calling it, and they're doing it well, but it's not Momofuku at its core, and you've done it. You've kind of set the record straight. I still think a soup and stew restaurant would be pretty ill.
Oh yeah, I mean that I'm 100%
I know.
down for.
Okay, is there anything else you can say about future restaurants that we haven't covered?
Yeah, I guess and I think Dave has this show on Netflix. He's cooking live for 1 hour every week, which is truly insane.
Insane. I think airtime. Holy shit.
And there's no swap outs. There's no, there's like, if he burns toast, the toast is burnt. And I think that in a lot of ways, the way we look at it, it's like, that's almost like a next generation restaurant. It's, instead of feeding 12 people, you're feeding 2 people, but millions of people can see it. And I think that that's what's really cool and interesting. And so I think that's kind of where Dave's brain is right now. But I think there are other people within our, the Momo universe that, I think are still interested in, restaurants and pushing food and, have something to say. And I think the next phase of Momo, a lot of it is giving those people a platform.
Is fine dining dead? Is fine dining on life support? Is fine dining thriving? All, none of the above? It's, you guys closed your fine dining restaurant, your most acclaimed one at least. I would call Major Domo, and I would call Noodle Bar not fine dining. Mm-hmm. That's my parlance. Marguerite, what do you think about this?
It's fascinating. I mean, I think factually, I think it's doing quite fine. Like, I think Le Bourdieu is as busy as it's ever been.
There's unicorns everywhere.
Yeah. But I think at least for us, it's going to need to change. I don't think it's out. I think it's just reevaluating what fine dining, I mean, the same way that Code did in 2008. It's rethinking again what is fine dining. And I think in a lot of ways, Co, started out as kind of the contrarian. And then I don't know whether a lot of other groups, followed, or if Co became less that contrarian and more just fine dining. But I think we want to go back to the drawing board and look at what it can be. And that's something I think that's exciting as well.
I mean, can fine dining's price point not be fine dining?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think in a lot of ways, and you're seeing this, it's like, Co was a tasting menu at $85 when it opened. And it's like, do you go back to it being $85? Yeah. Like, is that actually like the more interesting thing right now than, a $300, $400 menu? And maybe the food needs to look different, just given everything we know about the economics of a restaurant. But yeah, I think it's like, how about this? I think Momofuku is interested in celebratory occasion dining. And I think that's what you see at Major Domo. Our restaurant in Vegas does that better than anyone. So I think we're interested in being a place that people want to come and celebrate. But I don't know if that necessarily needs to be fine dining.
You look at Sugarfish, that's quasi omakase. It's definitely coursed out, has different tiers. To me, that crushes all day, every day. I mean, for me, my dream would be to see Momofuku's cost structure about that, where I can jump in and get a 45, 65, 85, or 275. Yeah.
I mean, if Joe wants to come back and do our version of Sugarfish, it's definitely something.
Oh my gosh, for kimbap. I mean,
tried to make her do.
We've written about kimbap, and it's in the cookbook. I mean, honestly, we talked on the episode. I'll link to in the show notes. It's great with Joe. I mean, she wants to do a good diner, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, put that out in the middle of the Catskills or Jersey or somewhere where she wants to live, wherever. I mean, put in New York.
Yeah.
I have to ask you, Zabar is in your name. So you're a Zabar. What's it like growing up on the Upper West Side as a Zabar?
It was very, I think, informative, both in 2 ways. One, just in terms of food in general, and that obviously being like unbelievably essential to my upbringing. But then I think also, growing up in this business and, dinner conversation was very much about, my grandpa has a printed out P&L that he would, whip out and talk about. And talk about mail order and, going through the pandemic and going through it with my grandpa was like also fascinating, right? It's like, what are they seeing? How are they dealing with this? So I think from a just, I'm maybe relatively young for a CEO, but in a lot of ways, I feel like I grew up kind of with all of this around me in a lot of ways.
You knew what a P&L was as a 12.
Yeah.
You knew what it was. You're just to be clear, you're the West Side Zabars, and the East Side Zabars is Eli. And we talked about Mike. You and great uncle Eli are kind of, you guys have a great relationship. You guys are talking. I love Eli. He's been on the show. What an incredible dude.
Yeah, no, he's truly, my grandpa always calls him a genius, and I do too. Like what he was able to do for food in New York City, I think a lot of people don't know. And I worked for him actually right after my only other like long-term job outside of like summer jobs working at Zabar's was working for him as a manager at his farmer's market in Amagansett. And I worked from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and it was extremely informative for me. I think coming into the hospitality industry, and I always joke that it's like once you've worked for Eli, it's like everything else is easy. So
he's a tough cookie.
And just even just the awareness, education, kind of like I think he's up at like 4 a.m. He has breakfast with his best friend at 6 a.m. Like just the ability, the stamina, I would say, is impressive.
He's a tough arugula for sure. I've walked around Eat, and I've walked around the Upper East Side grocery with him. And him holding court just like is such a privilege to walk around, have him pulling stuff off shelves, tasting constantly. I love that.
And also just, I think it's underrated. I mean, I think outside of Italy, the only place where you can consistently get like quality produce that you don't see everywhere is Eli. Like, where it's like perfect little gem. It's, your pink radicchios, all that stuff. The variety of like even just like peppers, where he sources like the proteins. Like, I think that was also extremely informative for me as a person.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. If you talk to any private chef in New York City, and I have many, we've written about them, it's like every single one goes to that grocery store. Yeah, it's truly where all private chefs cook, because when you have a unlimited or a nice food budget, you want to shop at Eli Zabar on the Upper East Side. There's like a weird narrative in the press that there's like a family rift. It seems like you're bridging the two sides in a cool way. I don't know is this a bunch of nonsense?
Rift? Yeah, no, there's no rift.
It's weird.
Yeah, it's weird. No. I mean, I'm extremely informed by both sides of the
That's
family.
Really awesome to hear, because I'm glad you said that, because it always bummed me out. I think it hasn't always been that way, and I think I profiled Eli in like 2010 or something, and it was like a little different. But it would be such a shame to have both sides of the family not talking, because they're geniuses in so many unique ways.
Yeah, no. I very much, at least my experience is, my grandpa's 91, his brother's 95. Yeah. Like, Eli's like a spring chicken at like 80.
Yeah, 80. It's all that Bordeaux, man. The Chateauneuf de Pape is like flowing through his veins. It's like definitely
no Bordeaux. Eli is famously.
Oh, that's right. He's Loire.
He's Burgundy. He's everything.
Burgundy. Sorry, yeah.
He and something I feel like I respect is at his wine store. I think he just doesn't sell Bordeaux, because he's basically like, I don't like it. Like, you shouldn't either. And I think that's very much like the mentality. And there's this famous story, which I think Eli would appreciate, which my mom actually worked at Eli's, and a woman asked for Jarlsberg cheese. My mom had never heard of Jarlsberg cheese, so she went to Eli. She said, this person's asking for Jarlsberg. Apparently, Eli goes up to the woman and goes, are you the person asking about Jarlsberg? We don't sell Jarlsberg, because Jarlsberg is a composite cheese, and we would never serve that. And, if you want that, like, don't shop here.
That's so great.
And like that mentality and that kind of commitment to, what he sells, and it being really much like a reflection of him, I think is something that, I have a lot of respect for.
It's not shtick. It's definitely just like owning your truth in the fullest way. I mean, his private cellar is legendary.
Yeah.
What he has underground is, and especially out in France, I'm sure many have written about it. Such a fascinating guy. And my last question, I know in Hudson Yards you try to market, and obviously pandemic kind of squashed it, but would you guys get into retail? I mean, you look at H Mart as a public company now. Clearly, there's a halo effect with anything Dave does. Seems like it's only natural that you would open some kind of retail, obviously, with your background. Or is that just nonsense?
I think grocery is fascinating in that, even in our lifetimes, we think a lot about things like olive oil, which there used to be olive oil. And now there's an understanding of a finishing versus a cooking. Coffee, there used to be coffee in grocery stores. Now there's, infinite variety. And you think about kind of the ability to, if you look at like food education and how that's reflected back in grocery, I think we're going to see that in global flavors in a way that we haven't over the next 5-10 years. And I think, I'm interested in both the product side, the market side. What's funny is like, people think that CPG is a great business. And my joke is that it's a better business than restaurants. So it's not a great business.
Yeah, no. All food is low
in
margin.
retail. That's what I'm saying. In retail is also, once again, maybe easier than restaurants. Maybe not. But they're all, just constantly in bad businesses.
You guys should sell Momofuku Nikes and that could be your business.
We did.
I know you did. Those are like a grail. People want those Nikes. I'm sure you have a pair. It seems like I ask about grocery and about retail because Dave is ahead of the curve. It's a real superpower. I've been a little hard on him in some ways, but I think you have to give him credit for being someone who has extreme foresight. And it seems like if there's anyone in food who could think about a new way to do grocery, it would be him and you and your team.
Yeah.
So I'd really be curious how you say. I would love to see a whiteboard about his perfect grocery store. More and from a P&L level, not just like some Simpsons dream car version of it, but like the real, like this can actually have margin that works.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's fascinating, and maybe when we're, we'll add another low margin business to our
oh my gosh.
our repertoire.
Yeah, you guys got to get into the higher margin. Media is also low margin too. Okay, that's funny. Marguerite, on This Is Taste, we ask guests about their discerning taste. So to close this interview, here's a little rapid fire, fast and furious taste check. Are you ready?
Let's go.
The best fruit.
I think mango.
I love that. Do you have a certain type or season you like?
I've had like unbelievable mango. Yeah. I went to Taiwan for work somewhat recently, but I also eat a copious amount of dried fruit. And I think mango is in every form factor, mango wins.
When dried mango hits, it hits. Obviously when it misses, wow.
Yeah.
Like that's going in the trash. But when it hits, it hits.
When it's good, it's good.
The worst vegetable.
I think zucchini, but I think it's not zucchini's fault. I think people just really poorly cook zucchini a lot.
Diplomatic. I'd agree. It's definitely in the lower quadrant for me. It's the water content fucks it all up.
Totally.
Makes it so hard to cook with. And also, there's just too much of it. And it's weird.
Totally.
You have to like shove it into all dishes. I agree on that. The best dessert.
The best dessert, I think, is tiramisu because it's the opposite of zucchini. Even when it's really bad, it's still pretty good.
Definitely. Hits high, hits low, hits notes. Your favorite American fast food chain?
Growing up in New York City, I feel like my exposure to fast food chains is relatively low.
Good point.
I feel like I'm a frequent Dunkin' Donuts. That is my like
interesting, and not in a judgmental way. Tell me about it.
I like if I'm driving, which is when I'm frequenting American fast food chains. It's like they used to have this like veggie egg white like flatbread that was like genuinely, I think, quite good. They now have these like wake up wraps. I guess my other answer, and this is maybe controversial, is I think like the Starbucks sous vide egg bites are sneaky phenomenal.
Dude, it's on record many places. That's a killer product.
It's unbelievable.
They sell them in the grocery store.
I know, and at Costco, and it's like I've had them. Like Delta tries to make them in the lounge. You can buy them, and like none of them are as good as Starbucks.
Oh my god!
I don't know how they do
the
it.
like generic version, the white labels are always trash.
Trash.
Fully agree. Your favorite New York City restaurant right now?
My favorite New York City restaurant right now is Mom. It's like M-A with a diacritic and M.
Yeah.
In the like Lower East Side.
Yeah.
It's a Vietnamese place, and it's truly phenomenal. They have this tofu dish where they make the tofu right before service, and it's like I've never had anything like it. So very, very
great call on Mom. I haven't been there yet, but I heard plenty. Your favorite LA restaurant right now?
This place, Sirwan Tofu House.
Yeah.
It's like,
of course,
so good.
Of course,
so good. And they have this black soybean, which you have to get, not the regular soybean. And I have many times over the past couple months basically taken my suitcase, gone there for lunch before getting on a flight back to New York.
How much time are you spending in LA these days?
A lot. We have some things in the pipeline, and then just the restaurant out there is great. And with Dave's media presence and studio being out there. So just a lot of
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, it's actually kind of surprising you're based in New York still, but
well, yeah, Dave and I are dividing and conquering.
Yeah,
so
no,
he's out there now, and I'm in New York. I mean, I've never lived anywhere else but New York, so we'll see.
Yeah, one day maybe. A couple more. Your favorite cookbook of all time?
Oh, this is like going to be lame, but I also use the Momo cookbook pretty consistently.
Yeah.
There's like I'm making ginger scallion probably once a week. The red eye mayo, as you said, is delicious. The sneaky, I think, best thing is during the pandemic, I was always making the ramp ranch. Have you made that?
I've never made it.
Oh my God, it is ungodly good. So that was my pandemic.
I mean,
go-to.
DIY ranch. If you hit the ratios right, I'm sure that book.
And this is. You basically take ramps, you pickle them.
Yeah.
And so you do like a ranch with the pickled ramps.
Yeah.
Very
That's
good.
killer. Couple more. Your favorite new cookbook discovery?
I got very into donabe cooking during the pandemic. And so there's a cookbook, I think it's just called Donabe. It's the woman who runs...
in SF?
No, in LA.
LA.
Like Torio is the store.
Right.
And so, rice, like I've made like every iteration of rice that she has in that book.
Our Donabe journeys were pretty consistent around the pandemic time.
Yeah.
I think we all bought one,
Donabe.
bought three. They're beautiful just to have around your kitchen. A reminder. I love that. Your favorite city outside America to visit for food?
London. I am absolutely obsessed with London. And I think there are people that still think, this like age-old idea of the food being bad. I think the food is fascinating. And they do really cool things. I know you and I have talked about whether it's things like dairy cows. Just I think the access to going during game season and the widgeons and the grouse and the partridges and all of that stuff is like my dream.
And you add the international cuisine is more international than America.
Oh, it's incredible, yeah.
In New York, that is. It's a city. And I feel Jordan Michaelman's working a big piece for us on the modern scene of London. And I hope, like, if you listen to this show enough, you know this is a refrain. Like, London's food is second to none, really. Great call there. So Momo's never been there, though. That's the interesting thing. I mean, you obviously have fielded offers and opportunities.
Totally.
It seems to me that could be a great city.
I mean, I would love it. We during the pandemic, literally, we were asked to open a restaurant with a major retail place, and we got really far. We did like literally like design and whatnot, and we finally were like, you know what? We literally physically can't go, and we don't know when we will be physically able to go in the future. So like. Probably not the best idea.
No,
but I was obviously gung ho.
Yeah, you got those on a PDF somewhere. It's in your inbox from 2021. You can dust them off at some point. A cuisine you would like to learn more about?
I've been cooking a lot of like classic French food, which is something that just very much has like never been my bag. But I made a poivre sauce for the first time. Cool. That was delicious, as you can imagine. And then I really want to make coq au vin. And I've got these heritage foods, stewing chickens that I'm really excited about.
I love that you mentioned Pat Martin's off mic, and Heritage is doing these old hens, these chicken hens, such great fat. Like it just feels like these dairy cows and these heritage chickens that are being recycled or upcycled, whatever you want to call it. Such a future food movement.
Totally. And it's like both the future and delicious. And so,
yeah, right. Of course.
That's perfect.
No, it tastes great. No, that's the bottom line. Last one, your favorite sandwich?
Just ham, butter, baguette.
Classic French, baby. Marguerite, this has been so much fun. I want to have you back. Please come back.
Yeah.
I'm obviously a Momofuku stan, if it isn't clear. And I'm just I'm so excited about your future. So thanks so much for coming in.
No, thank you.
Clayton, what's up?
How are you doing, Matt?
It's great to talk to you. You're the producer of the show. You're an editor. And you know what? We don't talk about the editor that much, which is kind of bullshit because the editor is essential.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm definitely not going to cut that part.
Eliza's out today, but I wanted to get on the mic and talk about some travels of mine recently. And I got to ask you, have you been to Palm Springs, California ever? Have you ever been?
I've never been to Palm Springs.
I've been there many times. I've been there like 15 times, and that's no joke.
Really? Why so many times?
I've enjoyed my times there for a variety of reasons. Mostly, I enjoy the just desert life. I think there's something like very restive and calming about the desert. Mm-hmm. And I also just love the architecture, as I'll mention on this little segment about my travels there. But I just wanted to see where we're starting with.
From complete ignorance, so give me a picture of this place that I've never been.
Oh, sure. So you drive from LA and you drive through like Riverside. Shout out to Tony's. I go there all the time. Great taqueria there. And then you end up in like a very vast, beautiful country that doesn't have a lot of population. Okay. Lots of wind turbines and mountains, and it's gorgeous. And you drive through that little patch, and then you end up at the city limits of Palm Springs, and you're right nestled against 2 mountain ranges. And Palm Springs has been a destination for folks in Southern California to visit since the 40s, and really the boom was in the early 60s. And with that, there's a legacy of historical mid-century architecture that dots the whole community there. So there's that going for it. There's also a little music festival called Coachella that happens out there. You may have heard about that.
I have heard of Coachella.
But I don't care. I don't go to Coachella. But when I go there, I go there for chill times. And I went there recently. I was at a really cool conference that I got to speak at about some of the work we do here at Taste. And through this invitation, I was able to visit some places that I hadn't been in my 15 times. And I wanted to go over some of them.
Yes, please tell me.
So Palm Springs in general, one of the big takeaways from my time there has always been the food has always been a little bit lacking. And it's not because folks haven't tried. There's a lot of factors that create this kind of bubble of mediocrity, I'll call it. It's mostly the generation of folks who've been going there are quite, I'll call them older generation. So I think tastes and preferences have been certainly informed by that. And there's a lot of outside folks going there. But also, for whatever reason, there hasn't been a lot of ambition there. It could be because of the lack of, in the summertime, it shuts down. It's so hot there. So it's a seasonal place. So that's an issue. But also, I just think that people haven't necessarily unlocked the concepts that work there. Like, it's a lot of really heavy food, which is bizarre to me because it's so hot. It should be light and acidic and refreshing food. And for whatever reason, it's stuck in this like steakhouse era.
So you think it's the fact that older people are the ones who come, and they come every year, and they want what they want, and nobody wants to make that sort of leap in order to shock them a little bit.
Agree. Well said. You summarized it really well. And on the flip side, there has been a change lately, and I wanted to go over a couple places that I found really exciting on this recent visit. The first place I want to really shout out is called the French Miso Cafe, which my friend AJ hit me to, and she's got a spot there. She lives in Brooklyn, and she golfs a lot. I mean, there's a lot of golf going on there. And I really was interested in it because it's a French style all-day cafe. I think it shuts down at dinner time. But she mentioned there's a great bento box there, and I'm like, sign me up. And in fact, amazing bento with some sockeye salmon that's been cured and pan-seared with shiitake mushrooms, broccolini, a little bit of rice, some tofu that's been marinated in soy ginger, and some crispy seaweed. It's all in the box form. It comes with a side of miso soup. And I really like these flavors, this traditional Japanese lunch plate being served in Palm Springs. For me, there should be more Japanese food. There should be more Korean food in Palm Springs. And I just loved it.
What was another place?
Another place I went to, and really, I have to give a shout out to our hosts from the tourism department in Palm Springs. Thank you so much for getting the reservation at Bar Cecil. I've been trying to get a reservation at Bar Cecil for a very long time. I think I tried like 4 or 5 times. And I was never able to land it, so they helped me out. So a little bit of history. Bar Cecil, I think, is around 5 years old, and it's from the folks behind Sparrow's Lodge and Holiday House, which I've stayed at Sparrow's Lodge, and I got to say it's a great hotel that's kid-free, has a great pool, and I haven't made it over to Holiday House to stay, but it's a great little setup there. And the owners are Jeff Brock and Richard Chrisman. And these hoteliers have a really great sense of history and style with their lodges and their hotels. But Bar Cecil is a standalone restaurant that they opened, and it's named after Cecil Beaton. Do you know that name at all? Cecil Beaton?
No.
I want to read a little quote because I was curious and I was doing some research and I found this little passage about this. It's actually a guy that Bar Cecil is named after. And he's a Renaissance man who is equal parts rebel and aristocrat, an artist who lived between classical charm and New World rebellion, a provocateur, an expressionist, an aesthete who incorporated many mediums to create a style of his own. So that's like the guy, the Cecil behind Bar Cecil. This guy's British designer.
So when you name your establishment that,
yeah,
the expectations are sky high.
Agreed.
I would think, right?
Yeah, absolutely. An aesthete, a provocateur, an expressionist. Okay, so I went for this meal, and I have to say, first off, it was good. And I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying it was extraordinary. I'm saying it was very good, and I love that. I love that there's a good restaurant in Palm Springs, so it's hard to find. I will say that the wait and like the difficulty to book it is challenging for me, but I get it. There's a lot of demand for like a good restaurant in Palm Springs. So really, the tip there is that they open their books 30 days ahead of time, so you can get the reservation ahead, or you can show up a little early and wait. Be nice to the person. I met a really great guy who was working the booth, and I feel for the guy who has to turn a lot of people around. Just wait around, be nice to him. But ultimately, they're well known for their $50 martini.
Well, you do not drink, correct?
I do not drink, you're right.
Were they able to make an NA version for you?
A $50 NA drink? You know, I didn't have the $50 martini. I was intrigued by it, though, and it does come with, I think, a little bit of caviar. It has some, like, luxury elements to it, and I appreciate that. I drank water. I had water with my meal.
Okay.
But that's okay. Like, I didn't really want to have a sugary NA drink. But what I did want to do is try the food. And as I said, it's a good meal. I had some steamed artichokes with an aioli, very classic California. The highlight, to be honest, I got to say, it's hard when you say your highlight is the bread course. But the Parker rolls with the date sage butter, yeah, really good.
That sounds very good.
Excellent. And then there's a roasted sea bream with miso glaze. And then there was a pretty good pavlova. So I would say this was an above average meal. I thought the room was cool. There's a lot of like people having those $50 martinis, and you could hear it. Mm-hmm. And I just gotta say,
they're complaining about it, about how expensive it was.
So Palm Springs is a place for vacationers to have fun. You know, have like a little, you know, go a little wild. You know,
yeah.
When you want to go out and have a meal, Bar Cecil's cool. I'm glad I went. Okay. So those are two spots I went to. I also want to mention I went on a architecture tour that I've been trying to book for like 10 years. So this was like the trip when I like called in the favors to get things booked. And again, I love visiting Palm Springs. It is such a cool city to visit for, and the architecture is a huge draw for me. So I really enjoyed that.
Tell me about the tour, and then tell me what your favorite piece of architecture was.
For sure. So this tour is called Mod Squad Tours. Again, I've tried to book for years, and really I've never been able to do it. But finally, I got a seat in Kurt Seyer's van, and Kurt has been doing these tours for I think 10 years. And I went on his interiors tour, which is a visit to 3 separate residences where we get to actually go inside. And I went to 3 very unique properties. One was a renovated hotel in the Taquitz River neighborhood. Another was this kind of, I would call it a little bit of it's in Little Tuscany, which is like kind of the hills that are above Palm Springs. This music executive was obsessed with cars, and he had like 4 cars in his garage, but it was like, had a really unique like fireplace with like very 72, very like fireplacey, very like I could see like Kenny Loggins hanging out there, mm-hmm. you know, in his prime.
A lot of hairy chested men on bare rugs.
Hairy chests everywhere.
Yeah.
And the other place I visited was a replica of a 1963 spec home in my favorite neighborhood, which is the Deepwell Estates, which I think has the best architecture and has some of the most iconic, houses in Palm Springs. But Kurt taught me a lot about Palm Springs architecture, but also he taught me something that I'd never really considered. We think of mid-century modern architecture, and we think about obviously some of these homes with a certain type of roofing, and you know they're more modular. It's in the international style. We also think about the home decor. So we think about Ames chairs by Herman Miller, Egon Eiermann sofas. We think about this very specific style of home decor. And we think of it as almost cosplay, like you have to have a certain decor to have a mid-century life. What Kurt was telling me, and this is part of this tour, which I love, it was not really the practice to buy all this shit. The reason we know the mid-century and especially Palm Springs to have all this stuff is that there was a very specific photographer who would stage the homes and shoot in this way and really make it clear. And I'm being like a little broad here, but make it like this was what they were selling. They were selling these houses with a specific furniture. In fact, the reality was that these folks owned second homes. They had limited means, some of them. And they kind of collected eclectic furniture from different eras at a variety of used furniture and swap meet places around Southern California. The Rose Bowl swap meet being one of them, which has been going on for years. So a lot of the home decor of real Palm Springs homes is actually eclectic and not in this kind of cosplay way. That's more the Airbnb model. So I really wanted to talk to Kurt about the kitchens. And he told me a little bit about what's happening in Palm Springs. So in mid-century modern, like a Wexler home and like these homes that have really small spaces and tight ceilings, they often have had the original kitchens ripped out and they're doing almost exclusively IKEA. You see a lot of IKEA in Palm Springs, and it's not because of expense, though I'm sure for some reason it is. It's because IKEA, this modular style, is like just making great kitchen furniture and making great kitchen appliances. And I have to say, I was like, wow, like, you're like, your design stuff, and you're telling me IKEA is really big here. And it's like, yeah, it's like kind of this wave, this movement here. So I'll tell you about one more place.
Please do.
And again, Palm Springs is one of my favorite places. I didn't want to, these are the places I went to on this past visit, and probably go again. I'll probably talk about new places, but Billy Reed. Billy Reed is one of my favorite places to visit in Palm Springs. And it's a restaurant that has like pretty good pies and strong coffee, and it's just this very, like, it was founded in like the early 1970s, and Billy is still there. The man, Billy Reed, the namesake, is baking the pies in the morning, and I just loved visiting Billy Reed. This is not the first time, not the last time I've gone there.
I love that he named his restaurant full name, not Billy's,
right? Not
Reed's, Billy Reed.
Yep.
That takes so much to just be like, my name's on it.
I'm the owner.
I'm the owner.
Spot.
That's it.
These are my pies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it's always, I've mentioned it before, it's one of my favorites. I had a lemon meringue. It was pretty good. I mean, I'm not going to like put the pies over as like the greatest pies, but I really love going there. I meet really unique people working there. They're always so kind and cool. Mm-hmm. And it reminds me a lot of restaurants when I was a kid, like early 80s, like earliest memories of restaurants in the Midwest. Mm-hmm. And like these old restaurants that had like the numbers above that would ding when your table was ready. Booths, lots of this like Victorian, weirdly Victorian, ornate kind of decor inside. Mm-hmm. Like that seems so out of place, but I just remember going to old restaurants that had this like old timey feel to them.
And when you were talking about the service and the people they hire, do you find that, you're saying the pies are good, but the people who serve the pies, if they're great, doesn't that make that experience great?
Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
Right. It makes such a big difference. And I think that's sort of forgotten a lot of times is who is serving your pies makes such a huge difference. And just your food, that experience of connecting with somebody is big, and it can sort of make the food a little bit better.
Yep. I love it. It's a great point for all restaurants, but yeah, when the food is mid to decent mid and the service is sweet and kind and offering you a free refill at any moment, I'm gonna go back. And again, I love this place. It's really timeless. Make sure to go and say hi to Billy.
Will do. Real quick, what's your favorite piece of architecture? It may be not something that you saw on this tour, but your Palm Springs architecture, that's your building. You always need to see it.
The buildings on East Palm Canyon and Indian Canyon Drive are two of my favorite strips. There's an old Chase that's around the bend that I love that they've just started to renovate that I think is amazing. The art museum there is an incredible collection of like photos from the area, and I really love the architecture center. I really like that place too. They have rotating exhibits of different designers. But if it was like a piece of like architecture in the neighborhoods, again, I mentioned Wexler, there's a whole Wexler section and these really unique structures. I would say Robolights is probably one of my favorite places to visit, which is its own installation, so to speak, kind of in the Meow Wolf vein of like this, like these like sculptures and structures that have been built by this eccentric family in the middle of Palm Springs.
As soon as you said eccentric family,
Yeah.
I'm in.
Yeah, it has a little bit of Grey Gardens going on, like what's happening behind the doors of this house that has literal funhouse style, 30, 40-foot sculptures in front of it, menacing faces, astronaut decor, lunar landings. I mean, really unique style of architecture in the middle of these very well-maintained and manicured homes.
Wow. Well, thank you for educating me on Palm Springs.
Yeah, Clayton, great catching up with you. This is Taste is hosted by Eliza Abarbanel and me, Matt Rodbar. The show is produced by Shalia Harris and Pat Stango and edited by Clayton Gumbert. Theme music by Steve Rydell. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter for updates on all cool things that are happening.